Hey everyone! Thank you so much for joining me at Andrew Carson Illustration this week. This is a very special video I have here for you this week. This is the first of 6 official sketching tutorial videos. They're available for my Patreon members, exclusively for my $5 Patreon members. And they're intended for anybody who wants to learn how to paint and draw. The concepts that I'm going to be talking about here will apply regardless of whether you want to use a pencil and paper, charcoal, digital tools, or if you're painting on canvas and traditional media. So anywhere that you want to take your creativity, these concepts will help you. So this is the first of 6. Here we go. So first, here's a word about charcoal. I'm using charcoal for these tutorials because charcoal is so easy to work with, it's so forgiving, and it's so cheap. You guys can have a full setup that you might need for like $10, $15 tops. You'll need to have 2 types of charcoal. A willow charcoal is a lighter type of charcoal. That's what I'm starting out with here. There's a denser, darker charcoal that's going to be very useful for you to do those deep shadows. And there's white charcoal too. Please refer to the PDF that's attached to this video on both my website and on the Patreon site for supply lists and for more details about what you need to get started on this kind of thing. So for this video, what I've done is I used to teach these classes in real time, and my classes were an hour and a half. And so what I've done is I've actually taken one of my assignments and worked it for an hour and a half. I timed it, stopped it at an hour and a half, and this is as far as I was able to go in an hour and a half to render this fish. And I would encourage you to similarly put a level of urgency in your own sketching time to give yourself like an hour and a half. Make it a hard stop so that you allot this time and see how far you can go. Point of it just to create the values that you see, not so much to have the lines out, but to create the different values. If you look around, like the original photo of the fish, I turned it into black and white so that you could see more clearly those values, showing how the ocean is a darker value gray than the fish itself. And the idea when you're doing charcoal is to show those differences in value pushing up against one another, because that's all that you really have when you're working from life is light and shadow working with each other to create form. That's what you want to try to render, to emulate with your charcoal. You have to start out with lines, but then you should be trying to kill those lines everywhere you can so that they're not really visible, obvious lines, but rather 2 different values that are working together. Use your hands, use your fingers to smudge the charcoal, and try to create a hard edge and then fade that hardest edge where the light and the shadow are the most intense and meet. From that point, fade that hardest edge into a soft blend with the nearest value that's around. So one part is hard, one half of it, one side is hard, and the other is softer. By way of example, take a look at like the space underneath the fish's jawline. So there's like kind of a hard edge underneath the jaw, so that you have a hard side and a soft side. It's a layered process, so the more layers that you put on, the more gray tones that you introduce, the more you're going to get closer and closer to getting those darkest, deepest pockets of shadow and those brightest pockets of light. As you layer in more, you smudge a little bit more, and you take away like just the bright white of the page and start filling it up with a value of some kind, even if it's just like a light texture. See, as you observe what I'm doing there, I'm just adding a little bit more, smudging a little bit more, getting closer to the values that I'm seeing on the original photograph. Use your eraser as like a piece of charcoal almost. You're creating edges with that by taking away some of what you put on. You can create an edge the same way with your eraser. Very important. Put down values, smudge it, soften it, and then go back and reinforce again with the charcoal after. And just kind of keep that process going until you get really close to the values that you're looking for. It's a push and pull, a constant push and pull. Again, use that eraser as like a tool. It's not just an eraser, it's there to create edges and values to bring up some of the whites that you need before you're ready to use white charcoal. So here I'm using now the denser, darker charcoal because right now I'm trying to like zero in on those deepest pockets of shadow. And the thing about the denser charcoal is you can't smudge it around as much. So you really got to be sure that you know where those hardest edges really are, and assert them because once you put down that denser charcoal, they got to stick. You can't smudge it around as much. You can blend it into the soft blend side of it, but the hard edge that you establish is going to stick. All those pockets where you have the deepest shadows and the brightest lights start to pop out your form. One of the secrets to creating a three-dimensional rendering is it lies in those darkest shadows and brightest whites, but you can't start there. You have to build up to them. If you start with the most intense areas, without putting in the underlying values that are softer and less distinct, you'll just have kind of a harsher image, which can work actually. Sometimes that might be what you want to go for. But if you're trying to like get the subtlety apparent in most imagery in life, that's the way to do it. The way to it is to build up to it. Reinforce, reinforce, reinforce. Smudge, take away, reinforce. Now, here I'm using white charcoal, so this is like the very end here. I knew I was running out of time and I wanted to make the lightest points pop out, so I started busting out with the white charcoal here. So I'm doing the same thing as with the dark here, but this is at the very end of the process is what you ought to be doing to use this charcoal that way. At the very end, to just pop out brightest, lightest highlights. So this is pretty much where I left off at about that hour and a half mark. This was about as far into it as I could go. I'd like to emphasize that you could keep going. I like if you look at the photo, there's obviously more spots and more textures, more values that I could have gone on. I could have probably spent another hour on this and kept going. So it really just it amounts to how far you want to push it. How far do you want to take it?
And there you go. I give you a fish. It is a fish. For you. Here you go.
And that concludes my first tutorial video here for you guys. My first official tutorial for my $5 Patreon members. Please let me know how I did. I'm growing into these tutorials and I'm very interested in hearing your feedback about where you'd like to see these go. That's it for now. That's it for today. Have a great weekend, everybody, and have a great week ahead. I'll see you next week. Take care.